we can also start to recognise that we have to continue to work really hard with our teaching teams to support them to understand about working with a child with ADHD. They are not naughty.
Welcome to Fika's Focus. Voices leading change.
All right, Morena, I am here by myself today. I am talking about one of the neurodiversity elements of ADHD. I'm bringing this conversation to you through my own experiences in 2020 something, I think. I was diagnosed as a medium to high ADHD individual. I was given a diagnosis based on not even going to find out a diagnosis. In fact, I was seeing a psychologist for some other therapeutic things, and within 10 minutes of seeing him, he was like, has anyone ever told you that you are probably ADHD? And Courtney looked at me and we kind of laughed, and I said, oh, look, I've always suspected it. And he goes, no, I'm pretty certain you are. So I thought I'd dig into some of those aspects, because we are finding that the rush to the diagnosis is quite quick. I think there's probably some underlying issues with the rush to diagnosis, and the labels and the perceptions that builds around a child, but also I want to discuss the strengths of having a neurodiverse mind like myself. So in my time within education, and I've been teaching since 2003 formally, I have been lucky enough to work with a child with ADHD every single year. When I came out of university, there wasn't much taught to me at university. I don't know if there still is today. I think people are far more aware of it. But I encountered a child in my first ever class who had quite severe ADHD, wasn't medicated, but presented with some very serious inabilities to participate and function in his peer group. So what, unfortunately, that built around this child was the perception of him being naughty. Quite honestly, the energy levels that this child possessed were extremely high. He had quite an infectious character, and his ability to focus on multiple tasks at one time was hard, like asking him to, could you go to the bathroom and then get your togs and get your lunch organised and things like that. That was quite a hard thing for him to do. It would overwhelm him. However, in one particular thing, he was deeply passionate about drawing cars. He would work on that for literally hours. So I started to get a deep insight into the real strengths of what ADHD and ADD do present in. So I'll talk to the process first within schools and obviously in our setting within ECE around what happens. And what happens is a teacher or teachers suspect that because of certain behaviours that the child could be on that neurodiverse range of ADHD. We start to tick off a few things and then think, right, we need to reach out for extra support. Then what happens is we engage in specialist support from the MOE. Then the MOE come in, they work with us based on our findings, based on our observations, based on what's going on. And then eventually we sit down with whānau, we discuss with whānau, hey, look, there is a potential that ADHD is a possibility, or ADD is a possibility, and these are the reasons why. Once we get to that point, and although you may not reach a formal diagnosis, because I believe within our school, which is crazy, but within a school scenario, the child needs to be 7, I believe. But we can start a process of helping us implement plans to support that child and them accessing the curriculum. Now, going back to my own personal experience, from a very young age, I was always very hyper. In fact, my parents put chicken wire around the fences so that I couldn't climb. Often my mum would receive a phone call from me escaping because I'd run down to the local school, and they would have to ring and say, "Oh, Raymond's down at school. He's followed Dion and Terry, my brother and sister." I was always running around, high levels of energy. Wasn't naughty, maybe I was, but I was more mischief, and it was very hard for me to sit still. And actually, quite frankly, I find it hard in some realms today to sit still for extended periods of time, unless I'm reading a book. However, sport was a big factor for me in staying physical. At that time, obviously, no devices and things like that. I could get out and be physical. It was okay for a 5-year-old to go out with a group of 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds and go down to the local school, and we played rugby or played league or played cricket or things like that. And we were quite active all the way through. And that was the era when my mum was like, "Get out of the house," kick me out. And I had to go and do lots of different things with different friends, and I got my bike and things, and we just roamed the streets. It was a different time. In today's world, where we can put a device in a child's hand, and the child is constantly, and this is the probably one of the downsides to it, the focus of an ADHD child, which is one thing that people don't realize, is that there can be an intense focus, and the intense focus is constantly going through on YouTube and things where they can constantly pick things that don't suit them, they don't like it, bang, 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 they can pick all that sort of stuff out and change their context quite quickly. That is a real damaging aspect to an ADHD mind, in my experience. I find, I'm not on social media now, but I got off it a couple of years ago, but I'd find that if I spent a little bit of time on Instagram scrolling, I would get so agitated in my mind, it would absolutely roll me up, and I'd feel like I've just had a full-on argument. And that, I don't know if that's unique to just ADHD people, or people with ADHD, sorry, but I can tell you that in my experience, it was like I'd had a massive argument with Courtney, or with my kids, or with my mum or something. That was the agitation it generated in me. So I can only imagine the agitation it creates in a child's mind when looking at devices like that. The other aspect that's of really hard nature for a child with ADHD is that my concern is always around the label. Now, we need to see a child before we see a label. The label allows us to potentially support that child. Remember, it is a child with ADHD. It's not, that's why I corrected myself before. It's not an ADHD Ray. It's that Ray has ADHD. We've got to work hard as not just a sector, but as an educational support system for these children. We have to work hard at seeing them first, and seeing their strengths, and seeing the benefits that they bring to their communities. If we label them in this realm, the damage that we can do to children in that space is putting a label on them. It just casts a shadow over them as an individual. Their behaviour is not great because they're ADHD, or no, they do this because of ADHD, because of ADHD. No, what we need to see is that the child is acting out. Their symptoms at times are often more pronounced, but it does not mean that they cannot be better or can even exceed their current mode or behaviours. I'll give you one example with me. Like I said about my agitation, I am able to sense when the agitation is starting to come in. So I take deliberate steps. I swim in the ocean most mornings, if not every morning, right even through winter. That is one big thing that has taught me how to cope, because what that allows me to do is actually be grounded and to breathe. The other thing with coping in that space is I also in that hyper focus is I have an ability to, once something comes into my mind, I action it. Now, a lot of ADHD children that I have worked with, they are very good at actioning things fast. The hard thing is for a teacher to keep up, and in those times where that child wants to really push ahead or streak ahead, we've really got to encourage them and facilitate that, because their strength actually is urgency. And that is something that sometimes the current traditional school system doesn't allow for. I also think it's really important that when we remove the label, yes, that person, Ray, that has ADHD, it also allows us to see actually how curious these people, the people with ADHD are. They're very inquisitive, probably more so. And I can think of some very specific examples from my own career with these children that they were exceptionally inquisitive, especially if it was about things that they were deeply interested in. I.e. cars, dinosaurs, certain movies, that just, I remember working with a child that they were absolutely obsessed with the Disney cartoon movies, and just drawing them and the interactions between the characters. It's just had a hyper focus on that. Mine has manifested in multiple ways, like my obsession with the sport of weightlifting, my obsession probably with the Warriors, and it's those sorts of really powerful abilities that a person with ADHD possesses that allows them to actually be extremely successful. I think also what you'll find with people with ADHD is in that space is that they become very conscious as they get older. They become very conscious of their behaviour, and because of that, they will try to hide that. So there was times in my life and my career where I had to hide the urge. Now, we were talking about this yesterday with a psychologist and a friend of mine, and he was saying, do you understand that for a child that will go through a school day hiding who they are to try and keep it together, they are doing everything to keep it together, that when they get home and they have massive outbursts, it's because they have had an itch that they have been desperate to scratch for 6 hours in the day. They have managed to keep it together, and then they get home and then they have an outburst at their parents or at their siblings or at their husband or wife or whatever it is. That is actually because they are hiding who they are. And that in itself is a very damaging thing. So to probably sum up a wee bit, we are going to continue to see children with ADHD. There are many factors we can look at. One thing that I look at myself, my own personal self, is my diet and nutrition. That's a really important thing, but we feel like we take care of a lot of that stuff within Future Focus and other childcares that provide chefs. I'm sure they are not providing high sugar and high fat content, things like that, saturated fats and things like that, and dyes and things that could really ramp up the individual's symptoms. We're going to continue to see children with ADHD, and we are going to work hard to see that as part of a complex set of makeup for that child, and what it does to inform us on how we can work with that child is it tells us that they can concentrate and they have got deep obsession with certain areas, but in other areas where they do not want to operate in or work in, we have to recognise that there is some of the symptom around that, especially when they're young, because cognitively their brain is still in a deep development space. We can also start to recognise that we have to continue to work really hard with our teaching teams to support them to understand about working with a child with ADHD. They are not naughty. It is just that their brain is firing in ways, or not firing actually, in ways that that they start to move in ways, and often consequence, and I can tell you that in my own life, consequence is often not seen. So we have to continue to really work on the kete for our teaching team in that space of trying to really help the child have great success in the school. And one thing that I'm quite passionate about, that this is my opinion, and I'm going to share this opinion, and I'm not saying that this is what everyone needs to do, because I don't know every single person with ADHD. Medication. Now, I tried to medicate. It didn't work for me. In fact, it only lasted a couple of days. I know there's probably differing research pieces that I'm not here to comment on research. I'm here to comment on myself, and my experience is this. It completely dulled me, the medication. Made me, I am a sweater, but it made me sweat more. And it really numbed a lot of what I saw as strengths for myself. And I felt that within 24 hours of taking the medication, I dumped it. I got rid of it. I couldn't deal with it, because actually it didn't work for me. And I have continued to maintain physical output. Obviously, the swimming, I read, and I've limited, like, I'm not on social media and things like that. There's a whole range of things that I've done to help myself and my own symptoms. The best medication that I have found is continuing to improve myself, to swim, to be physical, and to surround myself with the people that I love and care about as often as I can. Now, people that are accepting of who I am, that are accepting of my nature and behaviours, and are accepting of my neurodiversity. That is probably my major key point to emphasise in my experience around that. I'm not saying not to medicate. There are plenty of there's plenty of people who probably are doing very well on it. What I'm saying for me is that it was certainly not an option for me, which I found within a few days. But what I am asking is to really explore options in that space to make sure that if you are using the medication, that it's not forever, and that we can help that child or that person with ADHD really succeed in the world through having a deep understanding of who they are, of their character, and what their needs are. Awesome.